"There was one request," he said, "which certainly came as a surprise to me. As you know, Mr. Adrian Borlsover had left instructions that his body was to be buried in as simple a manner as possible at Eastbourne. He expressed a desire that there should be neither wreaths nor flowers of any kind, and hoped that his friends and relatives would not consider it necessary to wear mourning. The day before his death we received a letter cancelling these instructions. He wished his body to be embalmed. He gave us the address of the man we were to employ, Pennifer, Ludgate Hill, with orders that his right hand was to be sent to you, stating that it was at your special request. The other arrangements as to the funeral remained unaltered." "Good Lord," said Eustace, "what in the world was the old boy driving at? And what in the name of all that's holy is that?" Someone was in the gallery. Someone had pulled the cord attached to one of the blinds, and it had rolled up with a snap. Someone must be in the gallery, for a second blind did the same. Someone must be walking round the gallery, for one after the other the blinds sprang up, letting in the moonlight. "I haven't got to the bottom of this yet," said Eustace, "but I will do before the night is very much older," and he hurried up the corkscrew stair. He had just got to the top when the lights went out a second time, and he heard again the scuttling along the floor. Quickly he stole on tiptoe in the dim moonshine in the direction of the noise, feeling as he went for one of the switches. His fingers touched the metal knob at last. He turned on the electric light. About 10 yards in front of him, crawling along the floor, was a man's hand. Eustace stared at it in utter astonishment. It was moving quickly, in the manner of a geometric caterpillar, the fingers humped up one moment, flattened out the next. The thumb appeared to give a crab-like motion to the whole. While he was looking, too surprised to stir, the hand disappeared round the corner. Eustace ran forward. He no longer saw it, but he could hear it as it squeezed its way behind the books on one of the shelves. A heavy volume had been displaced. There was a gap in the row of books where it had gone in. In his fear lest it should escape him again, he seized the first book that came to his hand and plugged it into the hole. Then, emptying 2 shelves of their contents, he took the wooden boards and propped them up in front to make his barrier doubly sure. "I wish Saunders was back," he said. "One can't tackle this sort of thing alone." It was after 11, and there seemed little likelihood of Saunders returning before 12. He did not dare to leave the shelf unwatched, even to run downstairs to ring the bell. Morton the butler often used to come round about 11 to see that the windows were fastened, but he might not come. Eustace was thoroughly unstrung. At least he heard steps down below. "Morton!" he shouted. "Morton!" "Sir?" "Has Mr. Saunders got back yet?" "Not yet, sir." "Well, bring me some brandy, and hurry up about it. I'm up here in the gallery, you duffer." "Thanks," said Eustace, as he emptied the glass. "Don't go to bed yet, Morton. There are a lot of books that have fallen down by accident. Bring them up and put them back in their shelves." Morton had never seen Borlsover so talkative a mood as on that night. "Here," said Eustace, when the books had been put back and dusted. "You might hold up these boards for me, Morton. That beast in the box got out, and I've been chasing it all over the place. I think I can hear it chawing at the books, sir. They're not valuable, I hope. I think that's the carriage, sir. I'll go and call Mr. Saunders." It seemed to Eustace that he was away for 5 minutes, but it could hardly have been more than 1 when he returned with Saunders. "All right, Morton, you can go now. I'm up here, Saunders." "What's all the row?" asked Saunders, as he lounged forward with his hands in his pockets. The luck had been with him all the evening. He was completely satisfied both with himself and with Captain Lockwood's taste in wines. "What's the matter? You look to me to be in an absolute blue funk." "That old devil of an uncle of mine," began Eustace. "Oh, I can't explain it all. It's his hands that's been playing old Harry all the evening. But I've got it cornered behind these books. You've got to help me catch it." "What's up with you, Eustace? What's the game?" "It's no game, you silly idiot. If you don't believe me, take out one of those books and put your hand in and feel." "All right," said Saunders. But wait till I've rolled up my sleeve. The accumulated dust of centuries, eh?" He took off his coat, knelt down, and thrust his arm along the shelf. "There's something there right enough," he said. "It's got a funny stumpy end to it, whatever it is, and nips like a crab." "Oh, no you don't." He pulled his hand out in a flash. "Shove in a book quickly. Now it can't get out." "What was it?" asked Eustace. "It was something that wanted very much to get hold of me. I felt what seemed like a thumb and forefinger. Give me some brandy." "How are we to get it out of there?" "What about a landing net?" "No good. It would be too smart for us. I tell you, Saunders, it can cover the ground far faster than I can walk. But I think I see how we can manage it. The 2 books at the end of the shelf are big ones that'll go right back against the wall. The others are very thin. I'll take out one at a time, and you slide the rest along until we have it squashed between the end 2. It certainly seemed to be the best plan. One by one, as they took out the books, the space behind grew smaller and smaller. There was something in it that was certainly very much alive. Once they caught sight of fingers pressing outward for a way of escape. At last they had it pressed between the 2 big books. "There's muscle there, if there isn't flesh and blood," said Saunders, as he held them together. "It seems to be a hand right enough, too. I suppose this is a sort of infectious hallucination. I've read about such cases before." "Infectious fiddlesticks," said Eustace, his face white with anger. "Bring the thing downstairs. We'll get it back into the box." It was not altogether easy, but they were successful at last. "Drive in the screws," said Eustace. "We won't run any risks. Put the box in this old desk of mine. There's nothing in it that I want. Here's the key. Thank goodness, there's nothing wrong with the lock." "Quite a lively thing," said Saunders. "Now let's hear more about your uncle." They sat up together until early morning. Saunders had no desire for sleep. Eustace was trying to explain and to forget, to conceal from himself a fear that he had never felt before, the fear of walking alone down the long corridor to his bedroom. "Whatever it was," said Eustace to Saunders on the following morning, "I propose that we drop the subject. There's nothing to keep us here for the next 10 days. We'll motor up to the lakes and get some climbing." "And see nobody all day, and sit bored to death with each other every night? Not for me, thanks. Why not run up to town? Run's the exact word in this case, isn't it? We're both in such a blessed funk. Pull yourself together, Eustace, and let's have another look at the hand." "As you like," said Eustace. "There's the key." They went into the library and opened the desk. The box was as they had left it on the previous night. "What are you waiting for?" asked Eustace. "I am waiting for you to volunteer to open the lid. However, since you seem to funk it, allow me. There doesn't seem to be the likelihood of any rumpus this morning, at all events." He opened the lid and picked out the hand. "Cold?" asked Eustace. "Tepid. A bit below blood heat by the feel. Soft and supple, too. If it's the embalming, it's a sort of embalming I've never seen before. Is it your uncle's hand?" "Oh yes, it's his all right," said Eustace. "I should know those long, thin fingers anywhere." "Put it back in the box, Saunders. Never mind about the screws. I'll lock the desk so that there'll be no chance of its getting out. We'll compromise by motoring up to town for a week. If we get off soon after lunch, we ought to be at Grantham or Stamford by night." "Right," said Saunders. "And tomorrow?" "Oh well, by tomorrow we shall have forgotten all about this beastly thing." If when the morrow came they had not forgotten, it was certainly true that at the end of the week they were able to tell a very vivid ghost story at the little supper Eustace gave on Halloween. "You don't want us to believe that's true, Mr. Borlsover? How perfectly awful!" "I'll take my oath on it, and so would Saunders here, wouldn't you, old chap?" "Any number of oaths," said Saunders. "It was a long, thin hand, you know, and it gripped me just like that." "Don't, Mr. Saunders, don't! How perfectly horrid! Now tell us another one, do. Only a really creepy one, please." "Here's a pretty mess," said Eustace on the following day, as he threw a letter across the table to Saunders. "It's your affair, though. Mrs. Merritt, if I understand it, gives a month's notice." "Oh, that's quite absurd on Mrs. Merritt's part," Saunders replied. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Let's see what she says. Dear Sir, he read, this is to let you know that I must give you a month's notice as from Tuesday the 13th. For a long time I felt the place too big for me. But when Jane Parfit and Emma Laidlaw go off with scarcely as much as an if you please after frightening the wits out of the other girls, so that they can't turn out a room by themselves or walk alone down the stairs for fear of treading on half-frozen toes or hearing it run along the passages at night, all I can say is that it's no place for me. So I must ask you, Mr. Bolsover, sir, to find a new housekeeper that has no objection to large and lonely houses, which some people do say, not that I believe them for a minute, my poor mother always having been at Westleyan, are haunted. Yours faithfully, Elizabeth Merritt. P.S. I should be obliged if you would give my respects to Mr. Saunders. I hope that he won't run no risks with his cold. Saunders, said Eustace, you've always had a wonderful way with you in dealing with servants. You mustn't let poor old Merritt go. Of course she shan't go, said Saunders. She's probably only angling for a rise in salary. I'll write to her this morning. No, there's nothing like a personal interview. We've had enough of town. We'll go back tomorrow, and you must work your cold for all it's worth. Don't forget that it's got onto the chest, and will require weeks of feeding up and nursing. All right, I think I can manage Mrs. Merritt. But Mrs. Merritt was more obstinate than he had thought. She was very sorry to hear of Mr. Saunders' cold, and how he lay awake all night in London coughing. Very sorry indeed. She'd change his room for him gladly, and get the south room aired, and wouldn't he have a basin of hot bread and milk lasting at night? But she was afraid that she would have to leave at the end of the month. Try her with an increase of salary, was the advice of Eustace. It was no use. Mrs. Merritt was obdurate, though she knew of a Mrs. Handyside who had been housekeeper to Lord Gargrave, who might be glad to come at the salary mentioned. What's the matter with the servants, Morton? asked Eustace that evening when he brought the coffee into the library. What's all this about Mrs. Merritt wanting to leave? If you please, sir, I was going to mention it myself. I have a confession to make, sir. When I found your note asking me to open that desk and take out the box with the rat, I broke the lock as you told me, and was glad to do it because I could hear the animal in the box making a great noise, and I thought it wanted food. So I took out the box, sir, and got the cage, and was going to transfer it when the animal got away. What in the world are you talking about? I never wrote any such note. Excuse me, sir. It was the note I picked up here on the floor on the day you and Mr. Saunders left. I have it in my pocket now. It certainly seemed to be in Eustace's handwriting. It was written in pencil, and began somewhat abruptly. Get a hammer, Martin, he read, or some other tool, and break open the lock in the old desk in the library. Take out the box that is inside. You need not do anything else. The lid is already open. Eustace Bolsover. And you opened the desk? Yes, sir, and as I was getting the cage ready, the animal hopped out. What animal? The animal inside the box, sir. What did it look like? Well, sir, I couldn't tell you, said Morton nervously. My back was turned, and it was halfway down the room when I looked up. What was its color? asked Saunders. Black? Oh, no, sir. A grayish-white. It crept along in a very funny way, sir. I don't think it had a tail. What did you do then? I tried to catch it, but it was no use. So I set the rat traps and kept the library shut. Then that girl Emma Laidlaw left the door open when she was cleaning, and I think it must have escaped. And you think it was the animal that's been frightening the maids? Well, no, sir, not quite. They said it was, you'll excuse me, sir, a hand that they saw. Emma trod on it once at the bottom of the stairs. She thought then it was a half-frozen toad, only white. And then Parfit was washing up the dishes in the scullery. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular. It was close on dusk. She took her hands out of the water, and was drying them absent-minded like on the roller towel, when she found that she was drying someone else's hand as well, only colder than hers. What nonsense! exclaimed Saunders. Exactly, sir. That's what I told her, but we couldn't get her to stop. You don't believe all this? Said Eustace, turning suddenly towards the butler. Me, sir? Oh, no, sir. I've not seen anything. Nor heard anything? Well, sir, if you must know, the bells do ring at odd times, and there's nobody there when we go. And when we go round to draw the blinds of a night, as often as not somebody's been there before us. But as I says to Mrs. Merrit, a young monkey might do wonderful things, and we all know that Mr. Bolsover has had some strange animals about the place. Very well, Morton, that will do. What do you make of it? Asked Saunders when they were alone. I mean of the letter he said you wrote. Oh, that's simple enough, said Eustace. See the paper it's written on? I stopped using that years ago, but there were a few odd sheets and envelope left in the old desk. We never fastened up the lid of the box before locking it in. The hand got out, found a pencil, wrote this note, and shoved it through a crack onto the floor where Morton found it. That's plain as daylight. But the hand couldn't write. Couldn't it? You've not seen it do the things I've seen. And he told Saunders more of what had happened at Eastbourne. Well, said Saunders, in that case we have at least an explanation of the legacy. It was the hand which wrote unknown to your uncle that letter to your solicitor, bequeathing itself to you. Your uncle had no more to do with that request than I. In fact, it would seem that he had some idea of this automatic writing, and feared it. Then if it's not my uncle, what is it? I suppose some people might say that a disembodied spirit had got your uncle to educate and prepare a little body for it. Now it's got into that little body, and it's off on its own. Well, what are we to do? We'll keep our eyes open, said Saunders, and try to catch it. If we can't do that, we shall have to wait till the bally clockwork runs down. After all, if it's flesh and blood, it can't live forever. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then Saunders saw it sliding down the banister in the hall. He was taken unawares, and lost a full second before he started in pursuit, only to find that the thing had escaped him. 3 days later, Eustace, writing alone in the library at night, saw it sitting on an open book at the other end of the room. The fingers crept over the page, feeling the print as if it were reading. But before he had time to get up from his seat, it had taken the alarm and was pulling itself up the curtains. Eustace watched it grimly as it hung on the cornice with 3 fingers, flicking the thumb and forefinger at him in an expression of scornful derision. I know what I'll do, he said. If I only get it into the open, I'll set the dogs onto it. He spoke to Saunders of the suggestion. It's jolly good idea, he said, only we won't wait till we find it out of doors. We'll get the dogs. There are the 2 terriers and the underkeeper's Irish mongrel that's on to rats like a flash. Your spaniel has not got spirits enough for this sort of game. They brought the dogs into the house, and the keeper's Irish mongrel chewed up the slippers, and the terriers tripped up Morton as he waited at the table. But all 3 were welcome. Even false security is better than no security at all. For a fortnight nothing happened. Then the hand was caught, not by the dogs, but by Mrs. Merrit's grey parrot. The bird was in the habit of periodically removing the pins that kept its seed and water tins in place, and of escaping through the holes on the side of the cage. When once at liberty, Peter would show no inclination to return, and would often be about the house for days. Now, after 6 consecutive weeks of captivity, Peter had again discovered a new means of unloosing his bolts, and was at large, exploring the tapestried forest of the curtains, and singing songs in praise of liberty from cornice and picture rail. It's no use your trying to catch him, said Eustace to Mrs. Merrit, as she came into the study one afternoon towards dusk with a step-ladder. You'd much better leave Peter alone. Starve him into surrender, Mrs. Merrit, and don't leave bananas and seeds about for him to peck at when he fancies he's hungry. You're far too soft-hearted. Well, sir, I see he's right out of reach now on that picture rail, so if you wouldn't mind closing the door, sir, when you leave the room, I'll bring his cage in tonight and put some meat inside it. He's that fond of meat, though it does make him pull out his feathers to suck the quills. They do say that if you cook— Never mind, Mrs. Merrit, said Eustace, who was busy writing. That will do. I'll keep an eye on the bird. There was silence in the room. unbroken but for the continuous whisper of his pen.